Hi. This is the first in a series of episodes on climbing anchors. Climbing anchors are extremely important for people who climb on ropes. For those of you who are boulders or free soloists, move on to a more interesting episode. Today, we are going to cover the fundamentals of climbing anchor theory and practice. The basic rules for good anchor building are encapsulated in two acronyms, SERENE and EARNEST. SERENE, solid or strong, means the piece of protection or bolts and the rock that holds them in place will support the load exerted on the anchor. This isn't just the static load of a hanging body, but the higher dynamic loading that comes with a fall. Equalized means each piece in the system is loaded. Often, equalized means the load on each piece is equal, but in complex anchors that may not be the case. In this illustration, the two pieces on the left share the load on the left half of the anchor. The piece on the right takes one half of the anchor load. The left and right sides are equalized, while the left half of the load is split evenly between the two left-hand pieces. They are equalized with respect to the portion of the load conferred to the left half of the system. In essence, piece L1 and piece L2 each take a quarter of the total anchor load, while piece R1 takes one half of the total anchor load. In this setup, a 120-pound load placed on the equalized anchor does not put 40 pounds on each of the three pieces. Rather, each half of the lower connection takes 60 pounds. The left side's 60 pounds are distributed between the two pieces so that piece L1 and piece L2 each bear 30 pounds. The right-hand piece, R1, takes 60 pounds. Redundant. This means that if one piece fails, another piece or pieces remain in place to hold the load. This includes bolts, chocks, slings, and beaners. Walk through your anchor system, and if you find one element whose failure causes the whole system to fail, that is, the climber is no longer supported, then the system is not redundant. Efficient. You have to be able to rig the anchor quickly and efficiently, without tons of extra elements, and without taking an exorbitant amount of time, especially if you're in the mountains trying to escape dangerous weather. No extension means that if a portion of the anchor fails, the weight-bearing elements, the beaners, do not slide or fall onto the backup element and shock load it. In this example, the loose sling is redundant so that it will catch the load if the main quick draw breaks. But as there is currently no weight on the backup sling, a break in the main quick draw will cause a shock load to the backup as the backup extends from slack to tight. This could cause a secondary breakage. Sometimes no extension does not mean no extension at all in the anchor. As you can see, with two equalized quick draws serving as an anchor, if one quick draw fails, you do get a slight extension in the anchor, but it is not shock loading the system. So you have a slight swing as the angle of the remaining backup quick draw goes to vertical. But this is not something to be concerned with. Earnest is essentially the same as serene, except that the elements, or the letters, are just moved around in a different order. Equalized, redundant, no extension, solid or strong, these are all the same as in serene. The last item, timely, is the same as efficient in serene. Either of these acronyms works as a good mnemonic for setting up sturdy, reliable anchors.
All right, so I've got my very long sling here. This is Dyneema, so it's very thin, easy to tie. And I'll tie two figure eights in it, so one on each end to create a quad anchor. This is kind of where it gets tricky. You want to line everything up and tie it as neatly as possible. That'll pay off here in a minute. Once I've got my quad anchor, grab some carabiner and attach it to, in this case I've got bolts. One here, one here. Alright, I'm trying to figure out what angle I think the climbing rope will be at, so that looks good. Open lock.
When you clip a quad anchor, clip 2 or 3 of the strands. Following best practices in using 2 beaners, clip each beaner on 2 strands, each beaner on its own pair. This keeps the beaners captured between strands bracketed by the knots. If you clip all 4 strands and one of the anchor points fails, your beaner is not captured inside of the loops between the knots and can slide completely off the failed end of the quad. The sliding X anchor is great as a self-adjusting anchor that can handle changes in the load direction. Notice how it can slide from left to right as the load changes. So if you have a climber wandering and meandering back and forth across the face, this anchor maintains equal load on both of the bolts, regardless of what side of the anchor he's on. To connect the sliding X, clip the beaner in one part of the sling. You twist that strand and then clip the other strand of the sling. In this way, if one of the anchor points fails, the carabiner will not slide off because it is actually captured inside the loop itself. Improperly connecting it will allow the beaner, or beaners if you're setting up a redundant anchor, to slide off the sling if one anchor point fails, because the beaners are not clipped inside the sling, but rather outside of it. While it's a great multi-directional anchor, as you can see, if one anchor point fails, the sling gets shock loaded as the beaner slides down to the sling's full extension. If the initial load is severe enough, the shock to the sling could cause the sling to break or the remaining anchor to fail. This has just been a primer. Tune into later episodes when we get into more of the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of climbing anchors.